there's something on your mind right now, you're like, I think I should be doing this, but it's hard. I'm scared. I'm uncertain. The results that you want are on the other side of hard things. And if it's really something that is in line with your values and the principles and what your skill set is, it's time to get in the game.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled Show. This is a show about people that were successful in a previous career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your host, Richard Coyne. And on today's show, we're so pleased to have Paul Thompson with us. Paul, welcome.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Paul, thank you again for joining the Road Less Traveled Show. Paul, if you would kind of maybe begin, just give us a little bit of your background, kind of what your former career was and things like that, if you could, please.
Sure thing. So I used to be a corporate drone. I was in the corporate life. I had an engineering degree. I was an engineer for several years. So were you. I was a computer engineer. I worked for an internet service provider, helped build the internet in our little neck of the woods. And it was, not an all bad job. It was okay. But I realized for me to have any kind of serious earning potential, I needed to go up the ladder and get into management. And I went down that track of, climbing the corporate ladder. And about halfway up the ladder, I realized that my ladder all this time was against the wrong wall. That I was like, this is not really what I want to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You're right. I don't have the technical background you do, but I was in the corporate world. I did work for tech companies and big independents. Way back, I worked for what's now known as Accenture, and then I shifted over into IT companies, software companies, and but yeah, you're right. Yeah, I love that analogy that your ladder was against the wrong wall. I would have to say that was my case too. So
really?
Yeah, exactly. So so as you were kind of realizing that, again, your efforts are for naught in a way, okay, you were making a good living, obviously. And, but at the same point in time, you realize that there's more. You kind of had to do a little bit more. So talk about that if you would.
Yeah, I was capped. Like I couldn't really grow much more. There's only a few ways to kind of create a really significant wealth. And one of those ways is to get into the C-suite. I did not see a path realistically for me to get there in any time in the next even 10, 15 years. Yeah. Maybe another path would be to work as a tech person anyway, to work for a really successful startup or a really established one of the big tech companies, and be very technical and have some serious chops and really create something really interesting that is not something that just the average person can probably build. I'm not that guy. I'm not a whiz kid in creating code. I didn't have any kind of competitive advantage there. So I thought management might have been my path. And you just kind of realize it's like, this isn't it. And I also realized that I had this wake up call moment where I was on a vacation and I wanted to extend the vacation, but work the extra week from the beach house and have my kids, play at the beach. My wife didn't work. And I called up my boss, and I'd been working with the company for like 9 years. I was a middle manager, I was a director, had lots of employees, great reviews. He's like, we don't do that here. Get your ass back to work on Monday. I expect to be in your office on Monday, 8:00.
Right.
And it hung up. I mean, it wasn't even a conversation.
Wow.
It wasn't, what's going on in your life? Like, what's happening? Or like, I appreciate your service, but we really need you. It was like, no, you get your ass back here.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, that put things in perspective for me. Thank you. What else could I do but tuck my tail between my legs and go back to work, be there at Monday at 8. But that was a moment I realized, I'm a wage slave. Like I am just exchanging my time for money. I'm not really building any equity, anything that's mine. I don't have any control. And that was the time I realized I wanted to go find something to kind of follow this other path to create my own personal financial freedom and build my own personal economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, that's why we call it the road less traveled. Again, people are on the W-2 world is fine. If you enjoy your job and you love what you do, great. But at the same point in time, the thing we always really try to emphasize to people is that, look, if you're relying on one stream of income, you're in a precarious situation because there is zero corporate loyalty to employees anymore.
Right.
I mean, it's not new. It's been gone for a long, long time. And in fact, actually, some people might even say that changed when ERISA was put in place, which was in 1974. And if you don't know what that is, that's the employee retirement, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Effectively, it made you responsible for your own retirement as of 1974. The idea of a corporate pension disappeared. and the idea of a pension for life disappeared.
Mhm.
There might be some, perhaps unions that still have some of that stuff, and
With
the
the
government
exception
still,
for sure. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then the government has some sort of a program, but even that changed. I was working for the federal government when I was in college. And even at that point, they changed the way that the federal retirement program used to work, and that was, even that was after 1974, a long time ago, since today. But
Mhm.
but you're right, you got to kind of come up with another path, and that was in a way very similar to my circumstance. So Paul, where did you go? Kind of what was the thing you kind of realized you were going to start taking more control of your destiny and of your path, and where did you kind of go with it?
When I first started, I had no idea. I was like, I just know it's not this. So
Yeah.
I went searching, I went looking, and I spent probably about a year looking for options. I looked at buying a franchise. I looked at trying to start an insurance agency. I looked at, what kind of businesses could I start? Should I like buy into ice machines? I didn't know. And I couldn't help but feel like all those things were either too small, or I was buying myself another job if I had bought some sort of franchise. And maybe there's a path eventually to be able to control your time, but you have to build a business pretty much from the ground up and learn how to be a business owner, et cetera, et cetera. Or in the case of a franchise, buy into a very expensive licensing fee to be a franchise.
Right.
So I thought, well, I don't think I really want to do that, even though I seriously considered it. I mean, there's a couple times my hand was on the line to sign. Like I was really close to buying a couple of franchises. I was serious about it, but I felt like it just didn't feel right. I couldn't put my finger on it. So what I ended up doing was buying rental properties. I thought, well, you know what?
Okay.
I don't really know what I'm doing, but I don't have to do anything else. I want to get out, but I don't have to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just start something. And I bought a rental property here in my backyard in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it was like, I bought it for like $30,000. It was like a Class C property. And I just wanted a proof of concept. So I'd been doing some studying. I thought, okay, I can do this BRRRR method that I've been reading about from Bigger Pockets, buy, rehab, rent, refi, repeat.
Yep.
So I did that and it worked. And I got all my money back after doing the rehab and doing the refinance. And I had a renter that was paying $650 a month for a property that I was into for, I think $40,000. And so I was learning that process, and I thought, okay, I like this. Let me do it some more. And so I did it some more. And I think in the next 18 months, I bought something like 18 houses, and I did 20 or so deals. Like I bought and sold a couple. And that was what I needed to like, it was a proof of concept of the business that I felt like I could manage, and that if I built it enough, it could replace my income.
Okay. Nice. So Paul, as you look back maybe to your corporate days, in the IT space, is there a funny story you can share that something happened to you along the way?
This is kind of a funny conversation or a funny topic, because I have to be careful about not talking about that world too much, because I lived in it for 17 years. And so once I get going, like my stories don't stop. So I'll try and behave myself and manage our time here. Okay. But I was just the other day thinking about, the boss that pissed me off so much. And when I'd already had my wake up call moment, and I was at work and I was pissed. And I was, at the time we were using like Messenger, like Yahoo Messenger type things at work to chat back and forth. And I was chatting on that, and I sent a text complaining about my boss to my boss by accident. I had just been talking to my boss. Then I went to talk to a coworker and say, that guy over there, my boss, he pissed me off, or I said something about him. And he's like, ? I was like, oh no, what did I just do? And thankfully it was in the context of where I could play it off like I was making a joke, and I was able to save face, and he probably really knew, but he rolled with it. That was a good example. And, just the ludicrousy of what happens when you get enough people into a corporation, where you end up fighting amongst one another, because when you're a small company, you feel like you're on the same page and there's not as much infighting. But once you get into these big groups, we were an engineering firm, meaning that there was an IT department and then there was an engineering department. And I was in the engineering department, and we had, typically most of us had engineering degrees. And frankly, we had chips on our shoulder and we thought we were better than IT people. Right. So part of it was our fault too. So, we would rail and complain against the IT department because they would give us these ridiculously underpowered laptops. And it's like, we're trying to do some fairly sophisticated things over here. Like we're trying to write code, develop solutions for our customers. And the very thing that we were designing for our customers out in the marketplace, our own company wouldn't use. So we wouldn't eat our own dog food. And so we would fight and bash our heads. And it wasn't until we had a chief technology officer that was hired from outside the company that had years of experience. He was a distinguished sort. And he came in and he brought his MacBook with him. And he said, I'm going to use this MacBook here. And I'm not asking your opinion, IT, if I can do this. I'm telling you, make it so that I can.
Right.
And it wasn't until he did that they started kind of thinking outside the box and saying, okay, well, these engineers have requirements that we have to listen to. And until then, prior to that, we were just fighting and trying to convince each other that who was smarter. It was silly.
I've seen it, when I was in the W2 world. A lot of my clients are the people that you're talking about in terms of just similar companies in different regions of the country.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, I think I did a little project for your company when you were there.
Probably so. I bet you did, because at one point it was Accenture.
Yeah, I was with a different firm at that point, but I think I did do a little bit of work, a short project for you guys. But anyway, it's crazy. So definitely, you're right. As companies grow, they start small. Everybody's on the same page. There's this huge camaraderie, and then they get bigger, and then they become more bureaucratic. And next thing you know, you got infighting, and you got departments against departments, and it's just crazy. And again, don't get me wrong, I don't have there's no easy snap your fingers answer for how to keep that stuff at bay, but it is a distraction, and it is something where unfortunately you're there's wasted money and there's wasted stuff going on there. So Paul, is it when you had that conversation with your boss about, no, you can't stay at the beach another week? No, don't be ridiculous. Get home or get back to the office tomorrow morning. Was that kind of the deciding factor that really said, I've got to make a change? There's something I've got to break. This is it.
Yeah, that was my moment. I was like, enough's enough. Like I finally got uncomfortable enough in a position to do the hard thing it takes to change my life. Gotcha. And I refer to that as the wake up call. And I think we're all going to have that wake up call moment in our life, probably several versions of it. And it may not be changing. It is the road less traveled thesis, though. It is. Yeah. I've been going down this way with certain information, and I have kind of had this moment where the scales have been removed from my eyes, and I was like, I've been seeing the world incorrectly. Like I have to change the way I behave. And the only way that's going to change is if I change, and I have to take responsibility for my circumstances. And they may not have been my fault, but they're still my responsibility. Right.
That's right. So
that's the moment that I'm like, okay, well, I have to do something different. I have to go and exert my will into the world. And, I hate the word manifest, but manifest this, go about making change into the world by putting my energy into another place instead of just thinking about how I can be the best employee over here.
Yeah. And again, you look at that request that you had, it was obviously several years ago and no doubt before COVID, whereas today that would be an easy one. You would think for an enlightened company. Now, again, obviously there are companies that are trying to force everybody back into the office, which to me is ridiculous. I mean, in my case, when I was in the W2 world, I was very fortunate in the fact that I came from the consulting space. So my client was where I would go, right. Not to the office, the company office. But then as my role shifted over time, and the entire second half of my career was really in the sales side, where I was running the sales for our consulting organization. And, I had the flexibility to do what I want because, again, my phone and my laptop, that was my office. If I went to the office, that's one thing, but at the same point in time, I would go to clients, I would work out of the home office. And then, so I was very fortunate in the fact that I had a lot of flexibility to be able to kind of so way before the remote working scenario driven largely by COVID, I was already doing that for, 10, 12 plus years, so it was already a habit in my case. So when COVID happened, I didn't miss a beat in terms of productivity. I was already used to it. Anyway, so as you were kind of really driving into the real estate space, again, you mentioned the proof of concept idea that you kind of really tested this out. Hey, that worked. Okay, let me do another one. Let me do another one. Let me do another one. Did you hit some obstacles that you can kind of talk about that you could mention?
Yes, I found out that I'm a terrible negotiator, and that tenants are fantastic negotiator, and that I kind of learned the terminology that I am a high upstart, low follow through personality. Meaning I'm a visionary, not an operator. I'm not an integrator in EOS terminology, right? So I have big ideas, I make decisions, and I want it to go happen. But when you're by yourself, you don't have anybody yet that can go do all the stuff for you. And so at first I was managing properties, and I was terrible at it. And I realized very quickly that I needed to outsource that to somebody else. And I went through 3 or 4 different property managers before I landed on the one that I use now, which I still use. And even so I occasionally have run-ins I'm not 100% satisfied with my current management solution, but they're good enough compared to what I had before. Right. And that's one of the things that I've found is sometimes you can find somebody who is better at the thing that you need to have done than you. And sometimes you just need to find somebody who is 70% as good as what you do it. And in my case, their 70% is actually a better outcome than if I've take on the responsibility of managing property. So although I could probably technically pull it off, the reality of my life is that I'm not really interested in that. And so I'm not going to do a job. I don't enjoy those steps. So I end up kind of avoiding them or forgetting about doing certain things. And I'm better off assigning that off to somebody else. That was a big lesson that I learned is the who, not how mantra is something that I've had to really step into. And that is a learned skill. That is not what you are trained to do as an employee. You are always thinking that you're the responsible party and you need to go figure it out. And as a business owner, you're answering, how can I find somebody who can do this versus me doing it?
Yeah. I tell you what, Who Not How, that's a great book again, but you're so right. It is a huge mind shift. And Kiyosaki talks about it in his first book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the concept of shifting from a W-2 mindset, from an employee mindset into an owner mindset, into an entrepreneur mindset. And he talked about how it was unfortunately a very not the best outcome for his dad, his poor dad, and it is tough. It's definitely, if you start out of the gate with that entrepreneurial mindset where you're kind of really realizing, okay, I have to, eat what I kill, what I hunt, whatever you want to talk about, whatever phraseology you want to use. If you start out with that mindset from the beginning, I think you'll have an easier time getting into the true entrepreneurial. If you're a sales guy that's, fully dependent upon your, commission-based only, you might have an easier time shifting over to a true entrepreneurial thing, running your own business.
I agree.
Versus the W-2. And again, I'm sure there are people that are going to prove me wrong on that. And I think there are obviously exceptions to everything, but definitely it is a mindset shift. It is definitely a mindset shift. And you really have to kind of overcome some things. There's definitely a lot of limiting beliefs that we unfortunately have ingrained in us as W-2 people. You mentioned one, I'm responsible. I have to figure this out. I have to make this happen. I have to solve the problem. Whereas who can help me with that might be the better question. Right.
Who can help me? And I'd like to spin off of that a little bit, what you're saying, that you were in sales, and it's something that I don't naturally gravitate towards. I think we should all accept the fact that we're all in sales in some fashion or another. Even when you're finding your partner in life, you're in some version of a salesmanship position, right? And we should always be learning how to raise money, and we should always be how to find resources, how to find employees. That's being in sales. And so I think if you're in a place where you're deciding to make a choice, anything that you can go into, even for the short term, that helps you learn how to be a better salesperson is a really good choice, because it makes you train that skill that you were just talking about. And it sounds like that's the world that you came from.
Yeah.
And it's just a skill that you will use for the rest of your life. It is fundamental to being in business.
Right. Think back to, for those of us who have read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which most of us have, but anyway, I'm sure not the entire world has. He talks about how he went over to interview, I think it was Singapore, and the journalist was a very skilled writer, and he recommended, she wanted to write a book, and he talked about, she said, I want to be a best-selling author like you are. And he said, go take a sales training class. And she was highly offended, absolutely disgusted with the idea, which is an oxymoron in a way, because you're so right. We're selling in everything we do, whether we realize it or not. We have to convince people to look at things from our perspective, to take into our point, to convince people to move forward. So yeah, there's so much of that really applies. So yeah, great idea. Great point. So Paul, as you were shifting and moving into the real estate, you mentioned the first one, you kind of said, okay, wow, this worked. What was really the point where the light switch flipped and said, yep, I'm really on a path that I can make this thing go? When did that occur?
Probably within the first 3 or 4 months. I think I bought something like 10 properties in the first 3 or 4 months, all relatively low in properties, but I was able to get them purchased, rehabbed, rented, and refied. And I was in and out with very little of my own money after it was all said and done on those transactions. And I kind of took a pause there. I just I wanted to wait. So I had, I think, 8, 10 properties, I can't remember exactly, in the first 3 or 4 months. And I thought, okay, let me look at the actual results that I'm seeing from these rent checks coming in, and how consistently can I actually get them? What is it like to actually manage these? And that's when I realized, okay, I can do this, but I want to have an outsourced management solution before I buy any more properties, because I still had a day job, and I was trying to manage 10 properties, and there were conflicts coming up, and I was doing, like, during my lunch hour, I would get in my vehicle and run over, and I would ask a buddy of mine who had a truck, and we would go pick up a used refrigerator and move it into one of the rental properties. And I was like, okay, this is not a scalable solution. And so while I'm out doing this, I would get a call from my boss or an employee or something from work, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just out at lunch.
Right.
And that wasn't a good way to be running things for very long. So I had to outsource things quickly, and I wanted to spend that time, what little time I did have of free, I wanted to spend that time actually buying the next deal versus managing my existing properties. And so that was kind of the moment that I realized, okay, if I make some changes, if I learn this who, not how strategy, or this effective delegation strategy, then I can see this scaling, and I see other people who have, 50, 100 units. And I thought, I'm going to do that, but I modified my goal a little bit. And I said, instead of buying 100 units that have $100 a month in net cash flow, how about I just get smarter at buying properties and buy 25 properties or 40 properties that have $250 of net cash flow per year. So basically, I was looking for better deals. And so it's so much easier to manage 25 or 40 properties than 80 or 100 or 120, right? And if they net you the same cash flow, why would you buy the other so-so deals? So I started looking for, at first I just want to get deals, like something that cash flow, just to see if I liked it. And then I got smarter. And then okay, this can work. Like I need to refine my approach a little bit, but the thrust of the experiment was successful.
Okay, gotcha. Is that where you are driving today in terms of just you're working on, you're still acquiring a single family, but more cash flowing properties? Or
I've completely changed.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't ask about, what do you do now? Yeah.
I have 40 or so rental properties in Central Arkansas where I live, and 3 of them are Airbnbs. And that's kind of like the foundation of my basic need income, so that pays for my groceries and my own personal mortgage and, basic expenses. Then I've kind of graduated up the food chain, and now I do multifamily or apartments. And so I'm in the project of building a multifamily project in Dallas, Texas, where the market's stronger than in my market, my home market. And then I just launched a fund where I am a fund manager. So along the way, I was learning the different strategies of real estate, and I kind of have learned that the fundamental asset that's really valuable in this marketplace is the money's in the money. So that's backed by real estate. So that philosophy I'm just really big on. So I was learning how to lend money out of my self-directed IRA, how to lend money out of my solo 401k. And I was doing that, and I liked my returns, and I liked that business because I'm a deal junkie. But once the deal is done, I don't want to be done. I don't want to be in there messing with, the physical tenants and toilets kind of stuff. Right. So I have kind of grown up the economic ladder to where I'm now lending money. So I'm raising capital from investors who want passive returns. Then I lend money from the fund to real estate investors, typically land flippers. And that's kind of the thesis that we do, is we do short-term asset-based loans.
Okay. Gotcha. Makes sense. So in your new world, is there a funny story you can share, something maybe happened to you recently?
It's funny to you guys. It's scary to me, but it's a good cautionary tale. I bought a property in Dallas, Texas, and it was about 23 acres, and there was a nice little creek that ran through it. We had an engineer look at it. He quoted out the bridge. We're going to do some nice developments on it, and we're going to do 1 acre developments that's on sewer, or that's on septic, because the sewer's not nearby. And after we bought the property, after we raised the capital, after we signed for a mortgage with a personal guarantee, the engineer came back to us and said, "Oh, I ran the numbers again. It turns out the bridge is actually 3 times the cost. This is not a profitable project." I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, we just signed for a, several $100,000, nearly $1 million loan here. Right. And you're telling me tough luck? Like, whoops, like what?" So, oh my gosh. So some lessons learned there is, don't take the first information you get from a professional that you're not already an expert in to heart. That you have to really challenge the assumptions that they're making. We've managed to salvage that project. We changed the name of it to, an acre, like we were going to call it, Levon Acres, like with the lake that's nearby. Yep. And we renamed it to Hidden Creek Village because, hey, let's just lean into the fact that there's a nice big creek back there. And so now we're doing multifamily development on septic, which is not common, but there is a solution that we found. And so we're kind of, we've looked at this thing from 17 different angles. And just this past week, we were talking to one of our engineers, and she was talking about what the different how much parking there is. And it's like, why do you keep pressing this parking issue? We're in the county. There's no rules that we're supposed to follow. I think you're pulling this out of somewhere, and you've been fighting this for 2 weeks. What is going on? Oh, my daughter lived in a place several years ago, and she had to park across the street. And so I promised I would just never let that happen again. And I was like, well, did you build it? No, but I'm building this one, so I want to make sure it's right. It's like, okay, stop taking your problems from some past deal and imposing it on us, because we're the one paying for it, not you. Right. Like we're cutting the checks here, so back off. And so she was way over engineering the parking, and parking doesn't make money. So
right, exactly. And a lot of people are going to fight for that because it's I can't remember the term, but the fact that it doesn't let water permeate through it is an issue for a lot of localities. And again, you mentioned you're in the county versus the town where that maybe that wasn't such an issue. But the amount of covered space you have for parking, people fight you on that as well. In the other direction, you got to have 1.5 or two parking spaces per unit typically. But anyway,
we went and talked about it with other people, and they're like, yeah, most apartment complexes that are built these days are way over engineered on parking. Like if you go and look at any of these places, they're the ones that are following that rule always have 30% of their parking spaces that are never used. It's like, then let's not build those.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, where are you today on your journey? You mentioned that you kind of have the stable that keeps you, covers your bills and pays your bills. You're developing now this particular property. Where do you see yourself in the future, a couple years out?
So I am a brand new fund manager, and I am definitely going down the path of being a fund manager. So in 5 to 10 years, I suspect I will be the owner of a fund or series of funds that does in funds and buys real estate projects. I suspect that I'll stay in the asset class of real estate because that's what I know. I enjoy it. It's interesting. It's a fundamental need. It's there's all kinds of good reasons to be in real estate.
Yeah.
And I want to be the capital raiser and the fund manager for the fund that we're in. And I'll build a team. I've already started doing this. I have some people on staff, and we'll probably bring some more people on staff and have a small business that does, has, $50, $100 million asset under management that's running funds. And then we'll still do our own projects. Like I like being a part of the business, but I'll just selectively choose projects that I find interesting and have, good profit potential and are serving a need that the market demands.
Nice. Paul, is there something that you do personally or perhaps through your company that you can mention that you do in a way to give back to help others?
Yeah. So I can't help but share what I learn. I just can't. It is the way I process information. I bring in information, I learn it, and I tell somebody else. So I run a paid for mastermind, but also a big part of it is I have a free community of people who are asking questions. So I do Facebook Lives and streams, and I host webinars that talk about these topics. And sometimes there's a reason for them to work with me. Sometimes there's not. And either way is fine by me. So long as I'm paying it forward, then I feel like I'm doing a service to the community. Nice.
Yeah, we do something similar. I mean, again, quite honestly, Bill and I feel like a lot of people were gracious to us in terms of some ideas, some guidance along the way when we were getting started. So we feel like we need to pay that forward. And, that's why we do the podcast. That's why we do monthly meetings and whatnot. And, try to do the same concept. So that's great. So, is there something, Paul, that you have recently maybe implemented in your business that's kind of helping you grow? You mentioned EOS. Is that something you've kind of gone down the path of recently, or you've been doing that for a little bit?
Yeah, I follow that mindset quite a bit. I hired a COO, so he's a trained integrator in the EOS structure, and we specifically, and this is what I have a mastermind, and I harp on this so much, is you got to know you're a business owner now. You have to know your numbers. You have to have a bookkeeper that is trained, and you pay the premium that they're worth to have your books square. And then you have quarterly, if not monthly meetings that you are sitting in the owner's seat. You're not trying to get in the operation. So many of us get pulled in the operations. Step away, pre-schedule this on a quarterly basis, look at your numbers and review your numbers like an owner or a board of advisors or board of directors would do. And that helps you make strategic decisions that aren't driven by being in the weeds. Because sometimes you're in the weeds and you just kind of react to the chaos and the tyranny of the urgent. And you need to step back and look at the business whole, because one day you want to be able to sell that business. And you want to be packaging that business with systems and processes and a financial statement that is marketable in the marketplace.
Nice. So you set the business up from the beginning with the intent to sell it at some point.
Whether you do or not is your call.
Exactly. Yeah. But you built the discipline in along the way. Right. So that's great advice. Very good. So speaking of advice, Paul, what advice would you share with somebody who's considering making a path change?
So the first thing I would say is that there's something on your mind right now. You're like, I think I should be doing this, but it's hard. I'm scared. I'm uncertain. And the results that you want are on the other side of hard things. So there's something calling to you right now. And it could be writing a book. It could be starting a company. It could be doing a side hustle. It could be something that's not for profit. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. There's something on your heart that you feel that you should be doing, but you're not because of fear, doubt, uncertainty. And if it's really something that is in line with your values and the principles and what your skill set is, it's time to get in the game. And if you're trying to build wealth, you want to get in the game that allows you to own equity in something, even if that's earning a job, earning an income, saving a bit of it, and investing in the stock market. And you're doing a broad-based index funds type strategy. That's fine. Whatever your thing is, do it and get as much equity as you can, because equity equals freedom.
Nice, great advice. Yeah. So, Paul, what's the best way for people to reach out to you to find out what you're up to, some of the things that you're doing?
Sure. My best place to find me is on my website, pauldavidthompson.com, or on social media, pretty much everywhere you would find me at Paul David Thompson, and it's spelled about the way you expect. And I'll make sure and send those links to you so you can put them in the show notes.
Okay, great. Absolutely. Well, certainly appreciate you being on today, Paul. Thank you for joining the Road Less Traveled Show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We also want to thank our listeners. Please continue to give us a 5-star rating so we can bring you more great content like our show today with Paul Thompson. And we also want to remind our listeners out there and everybody that we've got Park Capital Partners has a couple important things going on. First of all, we have the Park Capital Partners Value Add Fund, which is a 506c fund open today to accredited investors. And second, we have the Park Capital Partners Foundation, which is a 501(c) nonprofit that Bill and I created as a way that we give back, another way that we give back. And the way that works very quickly is, first of all, we fund the operations of it. So all the money donated goes to do its best work, which is to help others. Second, we donate personally. Third, we donate corporately. And finally, when investors invest with us, we make a donation to honor that investor to a pre-selected list of 15 different charities. So investors can feel not good about not only making money, but also helping somebody else along the way. So please reach out to Bill and myself, parkcapitalpartnersllc.com, parkcapitalpartnersllc.com. And remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.